The princess stood behind the great stone pillars of the royal court, her green skin glowing faintly under the golden lights of the hall. Her long red hair flowed down her back like a river of fire, and her jeweled dress shimmered with every breath she took. But none of that mattered now. Outside the palace walls, war had come to her planet, and the skies were no longer safe. They came without warning. The enemy ships tore through the clouds like angry wolves, their weapons lighting the heavens on fire. Altheria's defenses fought hard, but the invaders were fast, brutal, and merciless. Cities fell one after another, and the people whispered one name with fear: the Gorgex. The king ordered the royal fleet to protect the capital. He believed their technology would be enough. He believed their walls were too strong. But belief didn't stop the sky from burning. It didn't stop the screams in the night, or the ground from shaking under alien boots. Princess Solara had never seen battle before. She had read stories, studied tactics, trained with guards, but this was different. This was real. And when the palace shields finally broke, she saw death up close. It wore black armor and spoke in a tongue that made her bones feel cold. Her guards fell trying to protect her. One by one, brave warriors gave their lives. She ran through secret tunnels, through ancient halls carved by her ancestors. She didn't know where she was going. She just knew she had to survive. Because if the Gorgex captured her, they would break her spirit, and with it, the spirit of her people. Somewhere in the eastern corridor of the mountain palace, she stumbled. Her foot caught on a root growing through the stone. She crashed to the ground, her crown slipping from her head. For the first time in her life, the princess cried out, not in fear, but in despair. Then she heard it. A voice, not like the Gorgex, not like her own kind. It was deeper, warmer, and somehow calm. A figure stepped out from the shadows, holding a strange weapon and wearing armor she didn't recognize. It was a human. He looked nothing like the noble she had grown up around. His armor was scratched and mismatched. His face had a scar running down the side. His eyes held no fear, only focus. He knelt beside her, helped her to her feet, and said only one thing: "You're not safe here. Come with me if you want to live." She hesitated. Her kind had heard of humans, dangerous, wild, unpredictable. Some even said extinct. But this one was real. He was standing right there, and his hand was steady. In that moment, with the palace burning and her people falling, she took it. Together they ran. Through the broken gates, across burning bridges, and into the deep forest. He moved like he knew the land, like he had studied every path. She asked. No questions, not yet. Her heart pounded with fear, but her legs moved with him. Hours passed, maybe more. Time lost all meaning. They hid inside a ruined temple far from the capital. The man checked his weapon while she caught her breath. Finally she asked who he was. He replied simply, "Call me Kale. I'm just a soldier. Not from here, but I came when I heard what they were doing." Solara looked at him carefully. He didn't act like a savior. He didn't speak like a prince. But his presence made the chaos feel distant. She didn't know why, but she believed him. Maybe it was the way he looked at her, like she was not a princess, but a person. As the stars rose above the trees and the firelight flickered on the stone walls, Kale stood guard at the door. He didn't speak again. He only listened to the night. Meanwhile, Solara thought about everything she had lost. Her family, her home, her throne. But something inside her whispered, this was not the end. This was just the beginning. Asterisk. The ruins were cold and quiet as the stars moved slowly across the sky. Princess Solara sat against the ancient stone, her gown torn and stained from the escape. She had never felt so far from the court, so far from the life she knew. But she wasn't alone anymore. The human sat nearby, sharpening his weapon in silence. His name was Kale, a soldier from a planet she had only read about. Humanity was believed to be scattered and broken, their homeworld lost to war centuries ago. Yet here he was, alive and breathing, and more real than any myth. She watched him work. His hands were rough but steady. His eyes scanned every shadow, every movement beyond the trees. He had the look of someone who had seen too much. And yet, when he looked at her, he didn't see a burden. He saw someone worth saving. "You don't talk much," she said, breaking the silence. Cale didn't answer right away. He looked at her, then back at the blade in his hands. "Talking doesn't change anything. Actions do," he finally replied. That answer stayed in her mind. Actions, not words. She thought of her court, her advisors, her people who always spoke in riddles and promises. But when war came, their words meant nothing. And it was this stranger, this human, who had acted. She wanted to ask him why. Why did he come to her world? Why did he help her? What did he want in return? But before she could speak again, he stood up in motion for her to follow. "We can't stay here," he said. "The Gorgeks hunt at night. We move now." Their journey continued under the dark sky. They moved through silent valleys, over broken roads, and past the remains of villages that once thrived. Zilara felt the pain of every fallen home. But Cale didn't flinch. He moved forward with purpose. At one point, they came across a group of Gorgek scouts. Zilara froze, her breath caught in her throat. But Cale reacted without fear. He pulled her behind a rock and raised his weapon, watching every move the scouts made. They passed without noticing, and only then did she breathe again. "How do you stay calm?" she whispered. Cale shrugged. "You learn, or you die." "I learned fast," he replied. His words weren't cruel. They were honest. That made them feel heavier than any royal speech. She nodded slowly, beginning to understand the kind of life he had lived, one with no crowns, no thrones, only choices that meant survival or death. They reached a hidden resistance camp by morning. Zilara was surprised to see more humans. Not many, but enough to form a small unit. Some wore battle armor, others worked on machines. All looked at her with quiet curiosity. One older man walked up to Cale and gave him a quick nod. "She the one?" he asked. Cale replied with one word. "Yes." Zilara stepped forward. "What is this place?" she asked. The man answered, "A safe zone, for now. We've been helping the locals fight back. And when we heard the royal family might still have survivors, we sent Cale to investigate." "You're fighting the Gorgeks with so few?" she asked. The man chuckled. "We don't need numbers. We've got experience, and we've got a reason. That's all we need." She looked around at the faces, scarred, tired, but alive. These weren't the kind of soldiers she was used to. They didn't wear polished medals. They didn't kneel. They stood tall, even when broken. And they looked at her not with fear or worship, but expectation. Later that day, Cale handed her a small device. "It's a comlink. If we get separated, use this to call me," he said. She took it, feeling its weight. It was more than just a tool. It was a line of trust. For the first time in days, she felt something strange hope. It wasn't the kind of hope born in fairy tales or royal stories. It was sharp and hard-earned, like the steel in Cale's hands. And she knew now that if she wanted to take back her kingdom, she would have to earn it too, not with crowns, but with courage. The air inside the resistance camp felt thick with tension. Every person moved with quiet purpose, repairing weapons, checking scanners, or guarding the outer edges. Princess Zilara had never been in a place like this. It wasn't royal, polished, or peaceful. But it was alive. Cale handed her a cloak. It was simple, brown, and worn at the edges. "Wear this," he said. "You'll draw less attention if we move out again." She slipped it over her shoulders and nodded silently. Her gown felt too bright in this world of shadows, despite being Royalty, no one treated her like a fragile glass figure. A young woman with oil on her hands asked Zilara to help move crates. She hesitated, then obeyed. The box was heavier than she expected, but she didn't drop it. The woman smiled. "Not bad for a princess," she said. Zilara didn't answer. But she smiled back. In the center of the camp stood a map projected by a small device. Red dots marked enemy activity. Green lights showed where civilians were hiding. She looked at the map, realizing how small her kingdom had become. How much land the Gorgaks had swallowed. Kale stepped beside her. "They're planning another push toward the east. If they take the river junction, they'll cut off supplies to 3 major settlements," he said. She nodded. "Then we can't." "Let that happen," she replied. He glanced at her, surprised. "You speak like a soldier," he said. "Maybe I'm becoming one," she answered. That night, the camp held a silent memorial for those lost in the last battle. There were no grand speeches, just names spoken aloud and torches lit for each soul. When Zilara lit a flame, she whispered the names of her guards who died protecting her. She didn't cry, but the pain inside her deepened. The next morning, Kale led her into the forest with 2 other soldiers. They were scouting old supply tunnels beneath the mountains. The tunnels were dangerous, unused for years, and rumored to be unstable. Still, it was the fastest route to the eastern post. Inside the tunnel, the walls were damp and echoed with every step. Moss grew along the cracks. Old signs in faded alien language warned of collapse zones. Zilara moved carefully, following Kale's lead. Her dress caught on a nail, tearing slightly. She didn't complain. One of the soldiers ahead raised a hand. "Movement," he said. Everyone froze. Kale signaled for silence. A few heartbeats passed. Then, from the shadows, small shapes darted across the tunnel floor. Not Gorgaks. Scavenger. Beasts. Harmless unless provoked. Zilara breathed again. She hadn't realized she'd been holding it in. As they moved deeper, the ground began to shake. A soft rumble echoed through the tunnel. Kale's eyes narrowed. "That's not natural," he said. A second later, the ceiling cracked and a section behind them collapsed. Dust filled the air. They were trapped from behind. No turning back. "Now," said Kale. They pushed forward quickly. The tunnel narrowed and the lights on their suits flickered. Then they found it an old storage room, sealed with a broken security panel. Kale forced the door open with effort. Inside were crates marked with the royal emblem. Zilara stepped forward, brushing dust from one label. "These are from the palace armory," she said. "We thought these were lost in the first attack." Kale opened one and revealed rows of pulse rifles. "It's a weapons cache," he said. This could turn the tide in the east. Before they could celebrate, another rumble shook the tunnel. "We need to move fast," Kale warned. They packed what they could, loading the gear into bags and cases. Then they continued down the muddy path, hoping the exit ahead wasn't blocked. When they reached the end of the tunnel, sunlight peeked through cracks in a sealed hatch. Kale pried it open and helped Zilara out first. She stood blinking in the daylight, her hands dirty, her dress torn, but her heart filled with fire. What they found in those tunnels was more than weapons. It was a reminder that not all was lost. Some things were simply waiting to be reclaimed. Asterisk. The Eastern Resistance Post was hidden deep within the jagged cliffs. Kale and Zilara arrived just before sunset, carrying the weapons they had recovered from the tunnel. The guards at the entrance recognized Kale immediately and opened the gates without question. Zilara followed him inside, her cloak covered in dust, her face marked with effort. Inside the camp, soldiers looked up in surprise at the sight of her. She was still their princess, but no longer just a symbol. She had dirt on her boots, weapons in her hands, and stories written in her eyes. Whispers followed her as she passed, not of royalty, but of strength. Kale dropped the crates on the supply table while the chief officer approached. "What did you bring?" the officer asked. Kale opened the lid, revealing pulse rifles, energy packs, and explosive charges. The man's eyes widened. "Where did you find all this?" he asked. Zalara answered. "In the tunnels beneath the old trade route. Forgotten since the first strike, but not lost." "Not anymore," the officer saluted her. It was the first time she had been saluted not for her title, but for her actions. She returned the gesture quietly, unsure if she deserved it yet. But it felt right. That night, the camp came alive with new energy. Training drills began again. Weapons were cleaned and distributed. For the first time in weeks, the soldiers believed they could win. The recovered arsenal had reignited a fire that had nearly gone out. Zalara stood near the edge of the cliff, watching the stars blink in the sky. Kale approached and handed her a small canister of warm liquid. She took it with both hands and nodded in thanks. "You did well," he said. "You've changed since the palace," he added. "I had no choice," she replied. "My world changed. I had to change with it." Kale sat beside her on the stone ledge. "Not everyone would," he said. "Some stay the same, even when the world burns. But you didn't. That matters." She looked at him closely. His face was quiet but not cold. There was something in his words that touched her deeper than praise. "You could have left me in that tunnel," she said. "But you didn't. Why?" she asked. Kale stared into the darkness for a long time before speaking. "Because I've seen too many leaders run. Too many powerful people save themselves. When I found you, I saw someone different. I saw someone worth saving." Zalara felt her chest tighten, not with fear, but with something heavier. Responsibility, trust, and something else she wasn't ready to name. A signal interrupted the moment. A scout arrived, breathless and tense. A Gorgex transport was spotted moving near the western ridge. "Looks like a patrol. Might be scouting our position," he reported. The officer turned to Kale. "We need eyes on them. Quiet and fast. You're the best we have," he said. Kale stood and nodded. Then he looked at Zalara. "You should stay. Here, it's safer," he said. She shook her head. "I'm coming. I know the ridge better than anyone. My people used to train there." "I can guide you," she replied. The officer hesitated but agreed. "Fine, but stay in the shadows. We can't afford to lose either of you," he said. They moved through the dark hills like shadows, stepping between stone and brush. The wind howled softly through the cliffs. Zalara remembered the paths from her childhood, when she used to ride along the trails with her brother before the war. At the top of the ridge, they saw the Gorgex patrol. 3 armored transports. Soldiers unloading gear and setting up sensors. One of them scanned the air, clearly searching for something. Kale crouched low, watching them through his scope. "They're building a jammer. They're going to cut our signals," he whispered. Zalara understood immediately. If the jammers went live, the resistance wouldn't be able to call for help or coordinate attacks. It would leave them blind and isolated. She turned to Kale. "We have to stop them." "Tonight," Kale nodded. "Then we plan the strike now, quiet. Precise, no room for mistakes." The stars above them offered no answers. Only silence. The wind cut through the night like a blade as Kale and Zalara crouched behind the rocky edge of the ridge. The Gorgex soldiers were still setting up the communication jammers, unaware that 2 pairs of eyes were watching from the shadows. Every second mattered now. Kale pulled out a small data pad and tapped the screen. A 3D layout of the ridge appeared, showing the transport positions and the jammer's range. Zalara leaned in beside him, her breath calm but focused. "There's a fuel cell just below the emitter. A single shot can overload it," she whispered. "That could work," Kale said. "But we'd need to time it perfectly. If one of them spots us first, we're done." He studied the path down the slope. "We split. I'll move behind the far transport. You get to higher ground and cover me, he added. Zalara nodded. Give me 5 minutes. Then strike, she said. They moved without a sound. She climbed the rocks toward a high ledge while Kale slid down the slope under the cover of boulders and bushes. Her fingers scraped against the stone, but she didn't stop. Her heart pounded, not from fear, but from focus. When she reached her position, she pulled out a small scoped blaster from her cloak. The metal felt cold in her hands. She steadied her aim, breathing slowly, watching Kale's shadow move between the enemy transports like a ghost. Below, Kale approached the fuel cell. The guards were distracted, talking near the rear of the camp. He opened a panel and slipped a small charge inside. Then he looked up toward Zalara's ledge. She was already aiming at the emitter. He signaled with 2 fingers. She squeezed the trigger. The blaster shot hit the emitter's base. A burst of sparks exploded across the jammer, just as Kale's charge blew the fuel cell. Flames shot into the air. The Gorgek soldiers shouted in confusion. Kale sprinted toward the ridge. Zalara leaped down, landing hard but steady. The 2 of them ran together, ducking under stray blaster fire. One Gorgek soldier spotted them and raised his weapon. Before he could shoot, Kale turned and fired. The shot hit its mark. The enemy dropped. They didn't stop to look back. The fire behind them lit up the sky. By the time they returned to the eastern post, the camp was already preparing to defend. The explosion had been seen from miles away. But with the jammer destroyed, communication was still secure. The officer met them at the gate. I saw the fire. Was it you 2? He asked. Kale simply nodded. Zalara stood beside him, her face firm. The jammers are gone. But they'll come now. Fast and angry, she said. The officer's face darkened. Then we'll be ready. You bought us time. We won't waste it, he said. As the camp prepared for a likely assault, Kale and Zalara returned to the edge of the cliff. The stars above them blinked coldly. Zalara sat on a stone, brushing dirt from her hands. Do you ever get tired of fighting? She asked. Kale didn't answer right away. He looked at the distant flames in the dark hills. Yes, but it's not about wanting to fight. It's about knowing you have to, so others won't have to, he said. She looked at him for a long moment. When this is over, what will you do? She asked. He shrugged. I don't know. I never thought that far. I didn't think I'd survive this long, he said. Zalara reached out and placed a hand gently on his arm. You've done more than survive. You've given people something. They lost hope, she said. Kale turned his head slightly, looking at her hand. You're the one they believe in now. Not me. I'm just the one who dragged a princess through a war zone, he said. She smiled. Maybe that's exactly what I needed, she replied. They sat in silence for a moment, not as soldier and princess, but as 2 souls in the middle of something bigger than either of them. The stars offered no answers. But for now, they didn't need any. What mattered was that they were still fighting, together. The eastern ridge burned through the night. The destruction of the Gorgek's jammer had bought time, but now the enemy was moving fast. The scouts reported that 3 Gorgek's warships had broken from orbit and were descending toward the cliffs. Everyone at the resistance post knew what that meant. They were coming for revenge. The camp braced for battle. Fighters were positioned behind trenches. Energy shields were raised along the slopes. Pulse cannons were calibrated and checked again. Princess Zalara walked among the soldiers, her presence no longer ceremonial. She carried a sidearm on her belt and wore a reinforced cloak to protect from shrapnel. She stopped beside a medic tending to wounded troops. One man had burns across his arm. Another coughed weakly beneath a thermal blanket. Zalara knelt and held a flask of water to the injured man's lips. He drank slowly, eyes wide when he recognized her. Your Highness, he whispered. Just Zalara, she replied. Kale watched from a distance. He had seen leaders before, but never one who sat in the dirt with soldiers. Never one who listened, touched their hands, or stayed until the last breath passed. He adjusted his weapon strap and joined her. They're scared. But they'll fight, he said. They deserve to live, she said. And if fighting is what keeps them alive, I'll fight too, she added. A shrill alarm pierced the silence. Everyone looked up. The sky above the ridge shimmered as the first Gorgek ship broke through the clouds. Its engines roared like thunder, followed by 2 more ships behind it. The ground trembled beneath their force. Kale moved to the command tent, where the officer barked orders. Shield up now. Cannons ready. All teams in position, the officer shouted. He turned to Kale. You and the princess front line. You inspired them. Stand with them, he said. Zilara didn't flinch. She took her place beside Kale at the forward slope. The wind tore at their cloaks. The enemy ships hovered, then released. Their dropships. Dozens of armored vehicles thundered toward the ridge, flanked by heavy walkers. Behind them marched Gorgek's troops in formation. Kale raised his rifle and took a deep breath. Hold the line. Wait for my signal, he said. The pie. Resistance fighters gritted their teeth. Then Kale fired the first shot. It struck the lead walker's sensor unit, sending sparks into the air. The battle began. Energy blasts lit the sky. Pulse rounds flew between trenches and rocky cover. Explosions shook the ground as resistance fighters pushed back with everything they had. Zilara moved between positions, directing fire and pulling. Wounded to safety. She shot with calm precision. Kale fought like a force of nature. He charged into advancing lines, taking down enemy troopers one by one. His armor was scorched, but he didn't slow down. At one point, a Gorgek soldier raised a blade toward Zilara. Kale stepped between them and blocked it with his arm. He turned and fired at point-blank range. The attacker fell. You all right? He asked. Zilara nodded, out of breath but steady. I had it, she said. He grinned slightly. I know. Just making sure, he replied. The Gorgek ships began to pull back after 2 hours of heavy loss. Resistance fighters cheered as the last walker exploded in a storm of fire. Smoke filled the air. The battlefield was quiet, except for the groans of wounded and the crackle of flames. Zilara stood in the middle of the scorched ground, her hair tangled and her hands shaking, but her eyes were still sharp, still clear. The officer approached, bruised and limping. We held them. For now, he said. Kale joined them. They'll be back, but next time they won't find fear. They'll find fury, he said. That night, the camp buried their dead. No songs were sung. Only names whispered as each body was wrapped in cloth and laid to rest in the stone soil. Zilara whispered each name herself. She didn't leave until the last grave was marked. She stood beside Kale at the edge of the hill, looking at the stars that watched in silence. This wasn't the end of the war, but something had changed forever. The morning after the battle brought silence instead of peace. The fires had died down, but the smoke still hung heavy in the air. Ash covered the ridge like a second skin, and the sky above was gray with dust. Soldiers moved slowly, their bodies tired and their hearts heavier than before. Zilara walked through the ruins of the front line. Her boots stepped over broken weapons, shattered shields, and dried blood. She stopped to kneel beside a fallen fighter and gently placed his pendant in her pouch. His family should have it, she whispered. Kale joined her a moment later. He carried a datapad with the latest reports. 3 outposts were hit last night. We were the main target, but they didn't stop there, he said. They're testing our strength, he added. They want to see if we can break. She replied. The resistance commander called a meeting in the central tent. Officers and scouts gathered around the holomap. Kale and Zilara stood together, listening as the situation unfolded. Supplies were running low. Communications were patchy, and reinforcements were days away. "We need to make a move," the officer said. "If we wait, we die slowly. But if we strike now, we can take back the eastern relay and restore control of the grid," he added. Kale studied the map. "It's risky, but if we control the relay, we can call in the Western Fleet," he said. Zalara stepped forward. "Then we do it. We lead the strike ourselves." "I'll go," she said. The room fell silent. One officer shook his head. "With respect, Your Highness, it's too dangerous." Kale raised a hand. "She's right. If she leads, they'll follow. And I'll be right there with her," he said. There were no more objections. They left that night under the cover of darkness. A small team of elite fighters moved swiftly across the jagged terrain. The relay tower stood atop a narrow peak, surrounded by cliffs and defended by Gorgex drones. Every step closer meant more risk. Zalara wore armor for the first time. It was light, flexible, and shaped to her movements. She moved like a soldier now, not perfect, but determined. Kale watched her from behind, impressed by how far she had come. When they reached the lower ridge, they paused. Kale used his scope to study the tower. 2 drones on the right. Automated turret on the north wall. Power generator in the center. He reported. Zalara nodded. "We disable the turret first. Then strike fast before they can call reinforcements," she said. The plan was simple. But simple didn't mean easy. Kale and 2 others crawled through the rocks toward the base of the turret. Zalara and the rest stayed back, ready to move when the signal came. Minutes passed. Then a silent flash in the dark. The turret powered. Down, they rushed forward. The first drone was taken out by a well-placed shot. The second turned and fired, but missed. Kale tackled it to the ground and drove his blade through its core. Sparks lit the night as the machine collapsed. Inside the tower, enemy guards reacted fast, but the resistance team was faster. Blaster fire echoed through the metal halls. Zalara ducked behind cover and returned fire. Her hands were steady, her aim true. One guard fell. Then another. Kale reached the control panel. "We need 30 seconds to reboot the grid," he said. Zalara covered him while the system hummed back to life. Lights flickered. Antennas aligned. And the signal burst into the sky like a pulse of lightning. "It's done," Kale said. But the fight wasn't over yet. Outside, more Gorgex troops approached. The team held their ground, firing from behind barriers. Zalara moved with purpose, leading the defense. Kale fought by her side, his rifle never missing its mark. Then came the explosion. One of the side walls was breached. Enemy fire poured in. Zalara was thrown back by the blast. Kale rushed to her side, pulling her to cover. Her arm was bleeding, but she waved him off. "I'm fine," she said. He looked at her and saw the truth. She was hurt. But she wasn't stopping. And in that moment, he understood something more than war. He trusted her with his life. Asterisk, the signal from the relay tower spread across the sky like a flare. Resistance bases far across the continent received the message and answered. Reinforcements were coming. The Western Fleet had changed course. Help was on its way, but the Gorgex knew it too. Their attack came swift and brutal. Waves of enemy troops surrounded the relay tower. Drones rained plasma from the sky. Zalara and Kale stood at the center of it all, holding their line with the last few fighters. Each breath felt heavier. Each second more dangerous. "We can't hold them forever," Kale shouted as another blast rocked the tower. The walls cracked. The ground shook. A soldier beside them fell. Zalara dropped to her knees and fired back, hitting 2 enemies with precise shots. "We just need to hold until they arrive," she said. Then came the sound they had prayed for. Engines roared above. Resistance dropships burst through the clouds, firing beams of blue energy across the Gorgex line. Soldiers rappelled from the air, guns blazing. The enemy formation broke in panic. The tide of battle had turned. Kale helped Zalara to her feet. Blood ran down her arm, but she didn't complain. Together, they charged forward, pushing back the enemy. The Gorgeks scattered, retreating through the cliffs. Victory was no longer a dream. It was real. When the last enemy signal faded, the field fell silent. Smoke curled into the air. Bodies of machines and warriors lay scattered across the rocks. The sky was still dark, but something in the air had changed. It smelled like freedom. The survivors gathered near the base of the tower. Medics moved quickly. Supplies were dropped. Leaders regrouped. But every eye kept turning toward the princess who had stood on the front lines. The one who had fought beside them. The one who bled for them. Kale stood quietly beside her. He didn't speak. He didn't need to. The look in his eyes said everything. She had proven herself not just as a royal, but as something rarer. A leader. Born in fire. The following day, a council was called at the capital ruins. Word had spread of her actions. High officials and court advisors returned from hiding. Many expected to reclaim control. They expected the old world to return. They were wrong. Zalara entered the council chamber wearing her armor. Her hair was tied back. Her hands bore scars. She looked nothing like the sheltered royal they remembered. She stood before the court, and every voice fell silent. "We survived," she said. "Not because of titles, not because of wealth. We survived because of sacrifice. Because strangers stood together and refused to run," she added. A noble interrupted. "You are still royalty. You must take the throne," he said. She looked at him calmly. "I will, but not alone," she replied. The room murmured. Whispers filled the space. Then she stepped aside, and Kale entered behind her. His armor was battle-worn, his face still healing from the fight. Some gasped, others frowned. No one spoke. Zalara raised her voice. "This is the man who saved me, who saved all of you. Not with magic, not with promises. With action." She. Sud, a court advisor, stood up. "He is not one of us," he said. Zalara walked to the center of the room. "He is everything we should be," she said. She turned to Kale and held out her hand. "I offer not just a crown, I offer trust. I offer my side. Before all of you, I name him my equal," she said. The hall erupted. Some cheered, some protested. But none could deny the truth in her words. She had not just returned with victory. She had returned with a new future. Later that evening, Kale stood with her on the palace balcony. Lights from the rebuilt city shone below. People sang. Children laughed. The war had not ended. But a new beginning had arrived. Zalara looked at him and smiled. "Thank you for finding me," she said. Kale replied softly. "You're the one who found yourself," he said, and the stars above, for once, looked peaceful.